Biden's Middle East mission unraveling after deadly hospital blast. Bloomberg. President Joe Biden's dramatic wartime visit to Israel and Jordan began to unravel even before He left the ground, after an explosion at a Gaza hospital left hundreds dead and Arab leaders pulled out of a meeting planned for the trip. Most read from Bloomberg. Hundreds dead at Gaza hospital as Israel. Hamas trade blame Israel. Latest. Biden to visit as oil climbs after hospital blast. Treasury yields climb as hot data fuel-fed wagers. Markets wrap. Will Xi Jinping's gamble on Vladimir Putin? Below are your comments. If you have watched the videos, it's a massive explosion. I don't think any of the rockets Hamas has are capable of damage like that. We know a few rockets made it through Israel's defenses, none of them caused damage like that. Who knows though, gotta wait for more info, I guess. We've certainly got to do something about Israel and stop her from responding to Hamas attacks. Israel should be required to just sit there and let Hamas do whatever it will. If Hamas attacks Israel, Israel should be unlimited in its response. Articles like this are horrible, blaming Israel for Fig. Hamas will go to any lengths to stir up support, even sacrifice their own people in a hospital and then blame it on the Israelis. Maybe the UN should look at the fragments of the Hamas rocket. If it was an Israeli attack, the damage would have been much greater. The hospital wouldn't be standing. Biden isn't smart enough or a strong enough leader to keep the U.S. out of a war, especially with a very weak administration mucking things up. Turn back President Biden. You are unnecessarily risking a war for the U.S. if something happens to you. Israel's attack on the hospital is no accident. They timed it just before your visit to destroy America's image worldwide and to draw the U.S. into another war. Next news. India aims to send its first astronaut to the moon by 2040. TechCrunch. India is set to take its space activities to new levels by sending its first astronaut to the moon by 2040. The obvious but ambitious move after the successful landing of its lunar probe Chandrayaan-3. Prime Minister Narendra Modi directed the Space Department to set up the country's native space station, called Bharatiya Antariksha Station, Hindi translation of Indian Space Station, by 2035, and send the first Indian astronaut to the moon 5 years later, the government said on Tuesday. Below are your comments. Good for them, but here is a heads up for you people in India. Here in the US, 12 men walked on the lunar surface in total. They had searched high and low for the man on it, and every hole they dug was not made out of cheese. After that disappointment we never went back, so I wish. I remember watching Apollo 11 take off in July of '69, on the east side of Orange County, about 27 miles from the Cape. You could feel the vibrations and hear the roar of those massive engines lifting off. the ground. That was a clear blue sky morning. Since India is so strong now, India should stop stealing patent of USA medical companies. USA citizens are now paying for the loss from India stealing and robbery of USA medicine patent. As a result, USA medical cost is prohibitively high, decreasing USA average life expectancy. Translation: India will still be talking about going to the moon at 2075. Pathetic moon run for accolades and compliments. Alas! What a waste of scientists' and engineers' lives, not taking the colossal financial resources to wave the flag. What about resources for all the slums, dowry burning, pollution, dilapidated infrastructure, child labor and corruption at all? Next news. U.S. completes delivery of Abrams tanks promised to Ukraine. Ukrainska Pravda. The United States has handed over the promised 31 American M1A1 Abrams battle tanks to Ukraine, along with spare parts and ammunition. Source: Colonel Martin O'Donnell, spokesman for the U.S. Army Europe and Africa Command, in a comment to Voice of America. European Pravda reports according to O'Donnell, all the Ukrainians who trained on tanks with the aim recon troops in Germany also returned to Ukraine. Below are your comments. That's great. 20 months after the war started, the U.S. is giving Ukraine 31 tanks. Way too little and very, very late. 500 tanks 20 months ago would have made a huge difference and perhaps ended the war, as the Russians had no minefields, major defensive positions, or heavy anti-aircraft and anti-Fine now that it is too late. They have lost their chance to save Crimea, and added another year to the war. All this is just symbolic and totally inconsequential in helping Ukraine achieve its ultimate objective of driving out the Russians. The ultimate game-changer for Ukraine is to provide them with a potent air power to control the air's pace and ability to hit Russian targets in Russian territory. And what F-16s in mid-2024? Biden could have shipped tons of A-10s over. If nothing else, for the gun mounts and spare parts. I bet you anything these are kept as far away from the skirmish line as possible. These are the top targets for Russia now. Next news. Brazil's Bolsonaro plotted coup after election defeat, congressional probe finds. Bloomberg. Former Brazil President Jair Bolsonaro should face criminal charges for plotting a coup d'état in response to his 2022 election defeat, the lawmaker leading a congressional probe into Jan. 8 riots that ransacked the capital, said in an official report. Most read from Bloomberg. Hundreds dead at Gaza hospital as Israel, Hamas trade blame Israel. Latest. Biden to visit as oil climbs after hospital blast. Treasury yields climb as hot data fuel Fed wagers. Markets wrap will Xi Jinping's gamble. Below are your comments. The initial plan, to take power from within, failed, she wrote. He tried to annul the election, but it didn't work. He tried to order intervention in the top electoral court, but he had no support. He stimulated social chaos so that he could declare a state of siege, but that didn't work either. I know of another loser who attempted that. Of course he did, and that's why before and after the election Jason Miller went to Brazil to advise him. Miller is 45 feet confidant till today. The left which are in power, now. Not because the one, because they did not, all had being worked out to put Lula back in there, to accommodate the big corrupt machine that always being draining the people and the country. Just recently, 83 million people donated. Apparently coup is the thing to do. Next news. Iran foreign minister warns, preemptive action against Israel expected within hours. Fox News. Iran's foreign minister Hossein Amirabdollahian threatened new fronts will open in Israel-Hamas war, and warned Tehran will take preemptive action soon. Below are your comments. Most Iranians abhor the theocratic regime that governs them. The massive protests that took place over many months left the dictatorship very weak. Let them attack Israel and they will receive a forceful military response from both Israel and the United States. The Iranian dictatorship might not sue. I hope they don't get cold feet. What's taking them so long? Do they need an invitation? We Americans have much to talk to you about. Come a little closer. The last time the US and Iran fought, we disabled their entire naval fleet in a single day. They have never rebuilt their naval strength following this encounter. The USS Gerald Ford and its battle group can with little actual effort, repel any incursions into the border of Israel will brief, So we're moving towards the dramatic conclusion Iran wanted all along. Israel has no choice but to wage all-out war if they themselves wish to survive. I wish people on comfortable campuses and in Starbucks in the US could understand that. Iran, what? You really think that your participation in support of Hamas will end well if the USA puts boots on Israeli soil? Next news. Zelensky confirms use of ATACMS missiles by Ukraine's forces. Ukrainska Pravda. President Volodymyr Zelensky thanked the United States and said that the ATACMS missiles have proved themselves to be efficient on the battlefield. Source. Zelensky in his evening video address published on social networks quote, "Thank you to everyone who is fighting and working for Ukraine. Thanks to everyone who helps. And today, a special thanks to the United States." Below are your comments. The use of ATACMS is great, but Russia is using their fighter jets in front line that Ukraine can oppose. Too much reasoning, whether Ukraine can use fighter jets or not, is not helpful. It will be best to stop reasoning and provide fighter jets, and the sooner the better. Any place or anything that assist in transporting U.S. and Western provided weapons is a viable target. The same as Israel strikes Syrian commercial airports that it claims are harboring Iranian troops and munitions. Russia should be doing the same in its Ukraine. These ATACMS should have been provided more than a year ago. If you want to keep our young American military out of harm's way, we must up the ante. Give the Ukraine military the equipment necessary to defend their right to exist as a democracy, even as a race. They need weapons that are actually capable of hitting Russia in their backyard instead of Ukraine. Next news. UN Human Rights Office condemns appalling reports that civilians in Gaza were bleeped by military. Street. Reich. The Hill. The United Nations on Tuesday condemned appalling reports that civilians who were trying to flee southern Gaza were hit and bleeped by a military strike. During a news briefing Tuesday, Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, spokesperson Ravina Shamdasani urged Israeli forces to avoid targeting civilians and civilian objectives. Below are your comments. UN. Why not condemn Hamas still firing rocket at Israel and not releasing hostages? This is a war. It is okay with them to slaughter Jews including babies and commit atrocities, but fighting back is no. What this pretend human rights is not reporting is that Hamas is bombing the Palestinians, bleepin' them taking keys as they try to flee. They are also omitting that Hamas UN Human Rights Office condemns appalling reports that civilians in Gaza were bleeped by military. Street. Reich. The UN Human Rights Office also announced that free Hamas flags and posters are available in the off-ice. Funny, in the 2014 conflict with Israel, UNRWA found for the second time one of their schools was being used by someone in Gaza to store weapons and rockets. They demanded an investigation and at the end quietly handed the weapons over to the governing body, Hamas. So seems the next news. Pentagon releases footage of hundreds of highly concerning aircraft intercepts by Chinese planes. Associated Press. The Pentagon has released footage of some of the more than 180 intercepts of U.S. warplanes by Chinese aircraft that have occurred in the last 2 years. More than the total amount over the previous decade, and part of a trend U.S. military officials called concerning. The photos and video were released in advance of a soon-to-be-issued annual report by the Pentagon on China's military power and the security threats it may pose to partners in the Indo-Pacific. The Pentagon has tried for years. Below are your comments. There isn't much that is more entertaining than reading Yahoo commenters' opinions of how a U.S. war would be with other countries. It is scary how sheltered and ignorant our populace has become. Perhaps it is because we have not seen a true war on our soil since the Civil War. Nobody knows the true saber rattling has increased dramatically since the internet came along, but the basic rules are still the same. Talk is cheap, China. We need to prepare for war as a nation. Every 20 or 30 years our enemies try to test us to see if we are still strong and determined. We have failed those tests and that makes them bolder. They begin to think now is the time. The best defense is an awesome offense. Give them a peek at what we are cap. Next news. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov set to arrive in North Korea. Bloomberg. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is set for his first visit to North Korea in about 5 years, as the U.S. made fresh accusations that Pyongyang is supplying weapons to help Moscow in its assault on Ukraine. Most read from Bloomberg: hundreds dead at Gaza hospital as Israel, Hamas trade blame is Rail latest. Biden to visit as oil climbs after hospital blast. Treasury yields climb as hot data fuel-fed wagers. Markets wrap: will Xi Jinping's gamble on Vladimir Putin pay off? UPenn donors. Below are your comments. This is a golden time to annihilate NK completely. There is not any item for NK to contribute to world economics and materials and peace to the world. They cannot feed their own people because the humanitarian aids have been spent to improve weapons for destruction of Kremlin Street. Lavrov: another GOP corruption Inc. Russian buddy, Trump loves to share our U.S. classified documents info with us caught on camera a few years ago in our White House. The axis of evil solidify their friendship. Trump must feel left out with all his buddies having the fun. And our potato runs from Israel. Putin in China. Lavrov in N. Korea. And comments, per G. Carlin, Education in America. Blah blah and no clue where is N. Korea or small China. Next news. Decision to provide Ukraine with ATACMS was made in August. Politico. Ukrainska Pravda. The White House made the final decision to provide ATACMS long-range missiles to Ukraine on 30 August. And sent them as part of a military aid package announced on the 21st of September. Source: Politico, citing 2 U.S. officials, as reported by European Pravda. Details. The debate on the provision of ATACMS broke out in the White House in July, when U.S. National Security advisor Jake Sullivan instructed his team to consider options for additional weapons that would help Ukraine hit vulnerable targets in the. Below are your comments. It is the biggest mistake to give Ukraine modern weapons, or Russia may use nukes, and nothing America do about it. Russia also give the most modern weapons Syria, Lebanon, Iran and NK Orea too, since America and West give Ukraine modern weapons. That is a line they crossed. Ukraine is not a NATO member. It seems this administration can keep a secret. Unlike the last one that was selling them. Ukraine did not have launch codes to the Russian missiles they housed in their country, so let's just send the missiles they had back to them and get this over with. The U.S. is in a war against Russia. This is exactly what the NWO globalists wanted when they put Biden in office. It's about time. Next news. White House. Ukrainian military confirm provision of ATACMS to Ukraine. Kyiv Independent. The U.S. has provided Ukraine with Army tactical missiles systems, ATACMS, the White House confirmed on October 17, after the Ukrainian military said it had used them for the first time on the battlefield. Below are your comments. Folks, this is easily best investment in combat in U.S. history. 300,000 dead and maimed for life Russian soldiers versus 0 NATO troopers. For a small fraction of our annual DoD budget, the US and NATO have enabled Ukraine to literally destroy half the Russian army. Now add to that major ships, Su. 165 kilometers is not very far. Thinking Kursk Bridge, for example. But at least they can be launched from ground, unlike the 180 kilometers Storm Shadows which require air launch. I hope some 300 kilometers ATACMS are on their way too. The U.S. has perfected a precision-guided 155 mm artillery round with twice the range of existing 155 mm artillery shells. Should Russia start making gains on the ground, U.S. teams will be sent to Ukraine to supervise using them. They will be the U.S. version of the little green men who invaded Ukraine. Keep them coming. Go ATACMS. Bad news for Russians as it will only get more deadly for them to face Ukraine's big guns now. Next news. Ukraine uses long-range U.S. missiles against Russian forces for first time. The Hill. Ukraine has used long-range U.S. missiles first promised by President Biden nearly a month ago against Russia forces for the first time. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed Tuesday. The Army Tactical Missile System, ATACMS, long sought by Kyiv, reached the country and was being used on the battlefield against Russia as of Tuesday, Zelensky said in a video post. Below are your comments. We should have supplied these in the beginning, and this mess would be over by now. 300,000 dead and maimed for life Russian soldiers versus 0 NATO troopers. For next to nothing in cost we can now add to that major ships, submarines and strategic air assets. Salve to Ukraine for paying the price of liberty in blood. Give Ukraine what they need to end this war decisively. These weapons systems should have been in our hands months ago. How many Ukrainian soldiers' lives would have been saved if they had these wire in the war? Ukraine will annihilate the Russian war machine if they are provided the weapons. They need more of these weapons. Russia just give up already and go home. Next news. FTX latest. Singh lived in the nicest room in the penthouse. Bloomberg. Nishad Singh, the former director of engineering at FTX, faces cross-examination at the Sam Bankman and Fried trial Tuesday. Most read from Bloomberg. Hundreds dead at Gaza hospital as Israel, Hamas trade. Blame Israel. Latest. Biden to visit as oil climbs after hospital blast. Treasury yields climb as hot data fuel-fed wagers. Markets wrap. Will Xi Jinping's gamble on Vladimir Putin pay off? UPenn donors pile pressure on school as David Magerman pulls support under questioning by prosecutors. On. Below are your comments. Of course, Sam is certainly not to blame for any of this. I mean, he couldn't just be another Bernie Madoff conman now, could he? Duh. BTW Bernie lived good in Butner, NC prison. He was protected and respected by the inmates because he could con millionaires into giving him moan. Why? He also cornered. Hopefully Ellison will take Playboy up on their offer while she still has her good looks. Defective altruism, EA, is about using evidence and reason to figure out how to benefit others and to actively try to make the world a better place. SBF identified himself as an adept of EA. Next news. Ukrainian special forces destroy 9 Russian helicopters, ammunition depot, air defenses in most say. Rias blow to enemy. The new voice of Ukraine. Ukraine's Special Operations Forces, SOF, destroyed 9 Russian helicopters, an ammunition depot, an air defense system and other equipment in an airstrike on targets near Russian-occupied Berdyansk and Luhansk in the east of the country. RLY October 17. Below are your comments. The destruction was via Western long-range missiles, not by Ukrainian special forces. How many aircraft actually got destroyed? Some claimed 9, others 6, and yet some said 2? Another unverifiable claim by the Ukrainians. They are yet to confirm the death of the Black Sea Fleet commander they claimed perished in one of the air attacks. What happened to Ukraine's counter-offensive in the south? Not too much news anymore. What if the Russian people actually knew the truth instead of Putin's propaganda? Very sad country. And 10 minutes ago there was an article that Ukraine bleeped 500 Russians and so on and so on. You'll think they would have won the war by now with these daily numbers. Next news. Russians conduct unsuccessful attacks on 6 fronts, General Staff report. Ukrainska Pravda. Over the past day, Russian forces conducted unsuccessful attacks on the Kupiansk, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Marinka, Shakhtarsk and Zaporizhia fronts. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Information as of 1800 on 17 October. Data. ILS. There were 56 combat engagements over the last day. Below are your comments. Russia keeps losing 600 to 800 or more soldiers in a losing effort every day. They don't have a well-trained military force, mostly just conscripts and prisoners now. Shame on Putin's army. Multiple attacks on 6 fronts flop. It's an everyday occurrence. Putin's military is a distant second in the Ukraine. Nice to see those 5 command posts annihilated. It helps cause confusion in the ranks. All articles from Ukrainska Pravda are pure propaganda lies meant to keep Western support for Ukraine alive. Russia's and Putin's time is running out. Interesting that live Ukrainian and Russian videos from front lines today show huge losses of Ukis. Next news. Israel Gaza. Hospital blast bleep hundreds, health officials. BBC. Hundreds of people have been bleeped by an explosion at a crowded hospital in Gaza City, health officials say. One doctor condemned what he called a massacre at Al Ali Arab Hospital, while another spoke of a scene of total devastation. Palestinian officials say the blast was caused by an Israeli airstrike. Below are your comments. Don't forget the people bleeped at a music festival. If they hadn't been, the 500 here would still be alive. Japan was told how they could end the humanitarian crisis in 1945. Hamas knows how its unconditional surrender can end it now. Both made bad choices. Finally, why is Israel condemned for? I did not think Hamas rockets were large enough to cause this much damage. Can anyone with knowledge comment on this? Mo taking sides, just asking. Since the war began, the military said in a statement that roughly 450 rockets fired at Israel by terror groups had landed in Gaza, endangering and harming the lives of Gazan residents. Next news. Orban calls war against Ukraine military operation in conversation with Putin. Ukrainska Pravda. During a conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban referred to Russia's war against Ukraine as a military operation. Source: European Pravda details. On Tuesday, Kremlin-aligned Russian news outlet RIA Novosti published an excerpt from the Conversati with simultaneous translation, in which Orban is said to have mentioned a military operation. Below are your comments. Just abolish NATO and establish a NATO 2.0 with Sweden in and with Hungary and Turkey out. It can't be that hard. Okay, when will NATO get their act together and kick out the Hungarians and Turks? Makes no sense for these two nations to be in NATO. These two nations have sided with Russia over and over. Enough is enough already! Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Orban is a traitor for the European Union. He and his country should be removed from NATO and the European Union. First step: give them €0 support. They will instantly feel that. Next news. Russia sending more forces in attempt to capture eastern Ukraine city. The Hill. Russian forces have launched a renewed offensive to take a city in eastern Ukraine, with Moscow pouring more troops into the battle despite limited gains. Russia began its major push on Avdiivka, a city located in the eastern Donetsk region that is heavily defended by Ukrainian forces, toward the end of last week. It's now. Below are your comments. Yeah. RU was moving ammo, fuel, and additional forces to the eastern and northeastern fronts in UA. Until ATACMS hit some of what used to be their facilities last night. That fuel, that ammo, those troop concentrations are target-rich environments for ATACMS. Huge game-changer. RU must move. I think Putin should lead the charge. Like to play a game of chess? Moscow so far failed to make any progress and is sustaining heavy equipment and personnel losses. Typical outcome is Russia losing 600-1,000 soldiers a day now. Death to the Russian terrorists, Slava Ukraine. Next news. Supporting Ukraine is in U.S. interest, most voters say. The Hill. Nearly two-thirds of voters say supporting Ukraine in its war against Russia is in the national interest. Rest of the United States, a new poll found. 65% of voters in a Quinnipiac poll released Tuesday think the U.S. supporting Ukraine is in the county's national interest. 28% do not think it is in the. Below are your comments. Let's do our own poll. Up for support, down for no support. Too late to chase down the poll, but how the questions are asked plays an important factor in results. Meanwhile, just talk to your neighbors and most don't have a clue for what is going on in the world. Cheaper to defeat Russia with help from Ukraine now than later. No aid for Ukraine. It is geopolitically inconsequential to the U.S. and the war should be resolved through an armistice. If Ukraine loses, do you think Putin will stop? Where were you guys when we spent $7 trillion in Iraq and Afghanistan? Wake up. Next news. Tesla calls for tougher U.S. fuel economy rules opposed by rivals. Bloomberg, Tesla Inc. is calling for President Joe Biden's administration to sharply increase fuel economy standards, and also to wind down a program allowing automakers to offset sales of gas-powered vehicles with credits from electric vehicles. Most read from Bloomberg. Hundreds dead at Gaza hospital as Israel, Hamas trade blame Israel. Latest. Biden to visit as oil climbs after hospital blast. Treasury yields climb as hot data fuel-fed wagers. Markets wrap. Will Xi Jinping's gamble on Vladimir Putin? Below are your comments. Of course their request is completely self-serving and should be ignored. Emission credit program is to help startups struggling to make profit. That program should not apply when a company start making profit. Hopefully Biden will ignore Tesla since they are not a union shop. Of course he is. But how would he get his parts shipments for rockets and cars? EV? I think not. Do ya think? Duh. Next news. Ukraine uses US-provided ATACMS against Russian forces for first time. C4ISRNET. While some versions of the missiles can go as far as about 180 miles, the ones sent to Ukraine have a shorter range and carry cluster munitions. Below are your comments. When the U.S. was fighting in Vietnam, the daily battle death totals and video turned the public again. Saint the war. Give them missiles that can strike Moscow so Russians can see the war and turn against Putin. Well, I think that President Biden should be saying if Russia escalates the war by using Iranian drones and North Korean weapons, we feel it is fair game to use longer-range missiles. Why can't the USA be offended for Russians escalating war? Remember George Washington said, "Do not get into foreign entanglements?" Escalation of the war cannot end well. The ones sent to Ukraine have a shorter range and carry cluster munitions. So there is no concern that these cluster munitions would bleep civilians around the military target. Next news. Ukraine uses ATACMS for first time in strikes on Russian forces in Luhansk, Berdyansk, Kyiv Independent. Ukraine struck Russian forces in Luhansk and Berdyansk with U.S.-supplied long-range Army tactical missile systems, ATACMS, marking their first usage on the battlefield. Below are your comments. Why are we constantly worried that escalations with Russia will happen? Breaking news, they are already escalated and Russia is in no possible position to do anything about it. Give Ukraine everything it needs, also Israel. If we do, then China will get the message to stay away from Taiwan. Please wait a moment. We must either help Ukraine, Israel and coming soon, Taiwan, or watch as the people behind those wars and conflicts find their way to our shores. Give them what they need. They are doing a superb job of fighting off a terrorist democracy-threatening dictatorship. I don't think Biden makes any decisions at all. Someone else does. The third and final world war is knocking at the door. Next news. Israeli official predicts U.S. involvement if Iran, Hezbollah join fighting with Hamas. Fox News. Israel's Sachi Hanegbi said during a TV interview on Tuesday that he could see the U.S. getting involved in the war should Iran and Hezbollah join Hamas. Below are your comments. That's exactly what Netanyahu wants. He wants the United States to sacrifice our young so that he can achieve his goal of ruling the Middle East. Please, someone in this audience answer me this. How many times has Israel sent its troops to fight alongside our American troops in any of our armée de cerca? They can predict our future. How amazing is that? Looks like the U.S. government is based in Israel. Our politicians should remember who they represent. Whatever is or is not done about it, the head of the snake is in Iran. Upon their instigation, while others to the west of Iran are being bleep off at an alarming rate, no hair on the head of the Ayatollahs is being touched. Next news. Russia will not maintain restrictions on Iran's missile program. Ukrainska Pravda. On Tuesday, the 17th of October, Russia stated that it would no longer comply with UN Security Council restrictions on providing Iran with missile technology starting Wednesday, when they formally expire. Despite the stance of the other parties to the Iran nuclear deal. Below are your comments. How can you say? But Iran is known to have directly contravened the agreement after the United States withdrew from it in 2018. Does it mean that an agreement between two parties has to be fulfilled by just one of them despite the other reneges of the accord? You must be kidding us. And we here, thinking twice before giving weapons to Ukraine because we don't want to escalate, haha. A laughing stock of NK, Iran and Syria. I don't think Iron Dome would stop a ballistic missile re-entering at MACH-10. Iran is laughing their socks off at you morons in the UN. Next news. More than 100 bipartisan lawmakers demand aggressive financial sanctions on Iran. The Hill. More than 100 bipartisan lawmakers penned a letter to President Biden on Monday calling on him to impose the maximum possible sanctions on Iran over its role in funding Hamas and outlining additional steps to bolster support for Israel's security. The letter, led by Reps. Josh Gottheimer, DNJ, Don Bacon, R. Neb, Jared Moskowitz, D. Florida. Below are your comments. He'll never see the letter. His handlers keep everything away from him. That's why he thinks he is doing a good job and loved by everyone. It is time for Americans to stop buying all products from all countries that deal with China, Russia, Iran and North Korea. That's the only way it will work. You can't count on the politicians who deal with whoever they make the most money from. Sounds good to me. Yeah, that will teach them, like those sanctions on Russia are working. Next news. U.S. has provided Ukraine long-range ATACMS missiles, sources say. CNN. The U.S. secretly provided Ukraine with long-range ATACMS missiles in recent days, according to multiple U.S. officials, providing Ukraine with a significant new capability that could allow its forces to hit new Russian targets that were previously out of reach. Below are your comments. They could have been sent 18 months ago. I hope that Americans messed the papers as usually and sent by mistake just a dozen ATACMS single warhead. I would like to get worried about the health of the Kerch Bridge. Just for the bridge part built on Ukrainian side. End of Russia as we know it. This time the revolution will be televised. Time to ramp up production on these bad boys and get some more out to them and have some on standby. For China. Crimea Bridge can sink any time. Make sure Putin know about the fate of his beloved bridge. Next news. U.S. secretly sends long-range ATACMS missiles to Ukraine. Kyiv forces use them against Russia for first time. Fox News. AUS. Official and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed America sent ATACMS to Ukraine and IV forces have used them against Russia. Below are your comments. Ukraine fights for Ukraine. Russia fights because they're afraid of Putin. Simferopol, October 17, RIA Novosti. Rogov said that cassettes from ATACMS missiles were found in Berdyansk. Russian air defense systems shot down several ATACMS missiles. Now shove the American miracle weapon between the buttocks in the USA. Press the start button and go to Mars. Simferopol. Oh. Biden is at the end of his miserable life. He's determined to take us all with him. Eventually Russia will have enough and the nukes will fly. It will be over within minutes. The dead will be the lucky ones. Obliterate Putin's army. Next news. Will Xi Jinping's gamble on Vladimir Putin pay off? Bloomberg. The last time Vladimir Putin set foot on Chinese soil, he went home with the promise of a no limit partnership from President Xi Jinping. Less than a month later he launched the invasion of Ukraine. He returned to Beijing on Tuesday in a diminished state, needing the economic support of China and a route out of his self-inflicted political isolation. Most read from Bloomberg hundreds dead at Gaza hospital as Israel, Hamas trade blame Israel latest. Biden to visit as oil climbs aft. Below are your comments. The eastern front of Russia has been neglected for a very long time. It is in need of development very badly. Same with the northeastern part of China. That presents lots of potential for growth and development there. The two nations cooperating in the area development will a win-win proposition. Next news. India eyes a new spaceflight age as Gaganyaan countdown begins. Gizmodo. Still on a high from launching back-to-back missions to the Moon and Sun, India is now ready to test its ability to send astronauts to space. Below are your comments. All this done on a shoestring budget. Also the cream of scientists, technologists don't join ISRO as the salaries are mediocre. So all this is being achieved without enough budget and without the top students, scientists. Wish ISRO the best of luck. Pretty sure the flight will succeed. Further advancement that should be undertaken after the success of this flight is to see the capsule is able to land on surface or land versus sea. There's only 3 nations that have sent a human into space: US, Soviet Union, Russia, and China. India may be the next nation to send a person into space. We shall see. Next news. VOA. U.S. military says all 31 Abrams tanks arrived in Ukraine. Kyiv Independent. The U.S. has delivered all the previously pledged 31 Abrams tanks to Ukraine, U.S. Army Europe and Africa Command's spokesperson Martin O'Donnell told The Voice of America. Below are your comments. People don't realize that the U.S. taxpayer is paying for Ukraine's regular government benefits. This should make people furious. Source: Ukraine's Finance Ministry. The state budget of Ukraine has received a grant from the United States for the sum of $1.15 billion on through the trust fund of many donor. We have thousands sitting in storage, slowly deteriorating. They were designed to fight the Russians anyway. Send them 1,000 and put them to some kind of use. 30 tanks, not noticeable. I'd hope it is a training unit and the real number is 300. Next news. Ukraine war latest. Ukraine uses ATACMS for first time to strike airfields in Russian-occupied territory. Kyiv Independent. NT. U.S. military reportedly says all 31 Abrams tanks arrived in Ukraine. Ukrainian forces launched strikes on military airfields in Russian-occupied territory overnight on O. Court. 17, using U.S.-supplied long-range Army tactical missile systems, ATACMS, for the first time. Below are your comments. The Russian army has not had a taste of what is arriving in Ukraine yet. Long-range M26 HIMARS cluster bomb rockets are arriving in Ukraine. It is enough firepower to easily win the war. Only one hand is now tied behind their backs. Fake Kiev propaganda picture. I refuse to read it. Bravo Ukraine and Orban is a disgrace. Hopefully the Russians won't capture any of these beasts. Next news. Ukrainians celebrate 75th birthday of Japanese man who opened free cafe for them. Next shark. Ukrainians recently celebrated the 75th birthday of the Japanese man who earlier this year opened a free cafe for those in need in the city of Kharkiv amid the Russian invasion. Background. Fuminori Suchiko was visiting Ukraine as a tourist in February 2022 when Russian forces broke into the country. Suchiko spent the next 7 months underground, living with Ukrainians in subway stations and helping distribute food for them. Below are your comments. Fantastic! Exclamation mark. Dot. I truly believe the Japanese are the greatest people on earth. Thank for your helping as human being. Free, 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 everything free. I have grown to like the Japanese culture. This is the one country that I would like to visit. Next news. Ukraine's commander-in-chief posts video of ATACMS missiles being launched. Ukrainska Pravda. Valery Zaluzhny, commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, posted a video on Tuesday evening showing the launch of ATACMS missiles. Source: Zaluzhny on Telegram. Details. The general thanked Ukraine's partners for their support. Below are your comments. Take out the railway to Crimea with a couple. Maybe the bridge if you have enough. Or if price is a problem, whatever is costs could be crowdfunded for this purpose easily. arrest Putin and ratchet up the pressure on Russia. They cannot win, so they might as well surrender now before it's too late. What a fantastic video. Very enlightening! Exclamation mark. Dot. To Russia with love. May the Russians receive their well-earned gifts in abundance. Next news. Kremlin rejects evidence seen on satellite images showing North Korea shipping arms to Russia. The N.EU Voice of Ukraine. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said there is no evidence that North Korea is shipping weapons to Russia, dismissing UK and US intelligence reports recently circulating in the media. News agency Interfax wrote on October 17. Below are your comments. We may not know what is in those railcars, but our DIA and NSA for sure has communications that show Russians talking about the shipments and what they contain. Of course, no, the Russians wouldn't lie. Now would they? Anyone who has to lower themselves to purchasing weapons from North Korea should be too embarrassed to admit it. Of course they do. No news there. Target those quickly. Next news. Putin has no rivals for presidency ahead of election, spokesman claims Fox News. The Russian government claims that President Vladimir Putin has no competition for the presidency in his upcoming election. Below are your comments. Well, of course he has no rivals. Any he did have are either imprisoned or dead, giving any who might have thought about it a healthy dose of what would happen to them. Make no mistake, these are true dictator actions he wields, and he has no compulsions over using the correction. No rivals that haven't been imprisoned or snuffed. Well, no one else wants to get imprisoned, poisoned, or walk out an open window. Just saying, Dmitry. Of course he doesn't, they all end up dead. Kinda suspicious? Next news. Death toll among Ukrainian citizens in Israel rises to 13. Ukraine's First Lady. Ukrainska Pravda. In a conversation with Israeli First Lady Michal Herzog, Ukraine's First Lady Olena Zelenska has said that as of the 17th of October 13 Ukrainian citizens have been confirmed bleep in Israel. Source. Ukrainian President's Office. Quote from Zelenska. We feel your pain, the pain of every family in Israel. Below are your comments. 13. That's a weekend in South Chicago. Really not about the Ukraine, right? Naturally we will have to send Ukraine another $2 billion. Wow. The chosen ones lead a sad life. I would call them losers. Not chosen ones. Very nice looking and expensive. Next news. Bloomberg. Biden plans to ask Congress for $100 billion in Israel-Ukraine aid. Kyiv Independent. U.S. President Joe Biden is reportedly considering a supplemental request valued at about $100 billion that would include defense aid for Ukraine and Israel, Bloomberg reported on October 17, citing anonymous sources. Below are your comments. No. What? Only 100 billion? Why not 100 trillion? After all, the national security of these countries is far more important than ours. Turn off the spigot. I'll have to give that a big no way! Exclamation mark. Please subscribe to my channel. And if you like it, please thumbs up.